Atlantis was never a myth. That's just what they want you to believe. From the moment you first heard the name, it was placed in the same category as fairy tales and fantasy, somewhere between unicorns and lost pirate treasure. A story, not a truth. A curiosity, not a reality. But what if that story wasn't fiction at all? What if Atlantis was real? And more than that, what if it was the missing link in our spiritual evolution, a piece of ourselves deliberately hidden, distorted, and buried beneath centuries of distraction? They told you Atlantis was lost to the ocean. What they didn't tell you is that it's been buried in your memory all along, hiding in plain sight, not as a place to be found, but as a consciousness to be remembered. This isn't just about lost cities and sunken temples. It's about a forgotten frequency. And if you're here, it means something inside you already knows that. Atlantis. The very word carries a charge, a spark of something ancient, powerful, and almost familiar. You've heard the story before. A mighty civilization, rich in knowledge and power, destroyed in a single day and night. That version comes from Plato, the Greek philosopher who lived over 2,000 years ago. Most people dismiss his account as a metaphor, a cautionary tale. But what if it wasn't? What if Plato wasn't inventing Atlantis but remembering it? In his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, Plato claimed the story was passed down from Egyptian priests through Solon, one of Athens' wisest lawmakers. They spoke of a continent beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, a land more advanced than any known at the time, that rose in power and fell in corruption. And yet, instead of taking Plato at his word, generations of scholars called it allegory, a fable meant to illustrate philosophical ideas. But ask yourself, why would one of the most revered philosophers embed such elaborate detail into something meant only as fiction? Plato wasn't vague. He described Atlantis with precision, its geography, its architecture, its social structure, and most importantly, its values. He called it a land built on divine order, where spiritual and material life were once in balance. He also spoke of its fall, a fall not caused by outside forces, but from within. Greed replaced virtue, ego overtook wisdom, and that imbalance between spiritual power and human corruption led to its end. This isn't just history, it's a warning. But Plato wasn't the only one. Look across the world, and you'll find echoes of Atlantis hidden in plain sight. The Mayans told stories of a lost land called Aztlan, said to have vanished beneath the sea. In Hindu texts, there's mention of a highly advanced civilization known as Kumari Kandam, swallowed by the ocean. Indigenous Pacific Islanders speak of Lemuria, another ancient realm lost to time. Even early Egyptian records hint at a forgotten epoch before the rise of dynastic Egypt, a golden age that mysteriously disappeared. These aren't coincidences. They are fragments, pieces of a global memory buried under layers of conquest, translation, and ridicule. There's a reason these stories all follow the same structure, an enlightened civilization that fell when it lost touch with its spiritual core. We aren't talking about myths. We're talking about memory, collective encoded memory passed through stories because history books would never carry them. But why bury it? Because Atlantis represents more than a city. It represents human potential, what we were once capable of and could be again. And for those in power, there's nothing more dangerous than a population who remembers how powerful they really are. Some knowledge is too sensitive for this platform. That's why we created Insights Academy, our free newsletter where we share what can't be said here. Join using the link below and get a free copy of the Kybalion while it's still available. Mainstream history frames time as a straight line, as if we're always advancing. But what if that's the lie? What if we've been here before, technologically advanced, spiritually connected, thriving in ways modern society can't even grasp? And then, through pride and imbalance, it all came crashing down. What if our modern world, with all its screens and systems, is just a shadow of what Atlantis once was? If you've ever looked around and felt like something vital is missing, something deep and ancient, you're not imagining it. That feeling, that longing, is a thread pulling you back to a truth you've always known, even if no one ever told you. It's not about nostalgia, it's about remembrance. Because Atlantis isn't just a story about the past, it's a mirror for the present. And once you start to see it clearly, you can't unsee it. We've been taught to see technology as something external: wires, machines, cold metals engineered for speed and convenience. But the technology of Atlantis was nothing like what we know today. It wasn't built for domination or distraction. It was built for alignment. Atlantean technology was spiritual in nature. It wasn't something you used, it was something you tuned into, a resonance between matter and mind, a bridge between the physical and the divine. Imagine a society where energy wasn't extracted from the earth through destruction, but channeled through intention. Where temples weren't just places of worship, but frequency chambers, amplifying sound, light, and vibration to harmonize the soul. Where crystals weren't decorative trinkets, but living tools, conscious instruments designed to store information, conduct energy, and assist in healing and evolution. According to many esoteric teachings, including Theosophy, Lemurian and Atlantean wisdom, and the readings of Edgar Cayce, Atlantis developed high spiritual science, one that fused consciousness with technology. They knew how to direct energy through sound vibrations, sacred geometry, and the natural properties of stones. Pyramids, built with laser-cut precision, weren't tombs, they were power stations. Obelisks weren't monuments, they were tuning forks. Crystals, especially clear quartz and others found in abundance within the Atlantean lands, were believed to power entire cities, not with fossil fuels or wires, but through harmonic resonance and light. These weren't myths. They were advanced forms of frequency manipulation, thousands of years ahead of modern science. Sound was a central tool. They understood that the universe is vibration, and that everything, thought, emotion, body, planet, has a frequency. By using specific tones, they could alter states of consciousness, heal diseases, and even levitate objects. Ancient Sanskrit texts speak of mantras that shift reality. Egyptian temples echo with chants that align the chakras. Tibetan singing bowls still carry the remnants of this ancient knowledge. Atlantis didn't invent these truths, it remembered them. But over time, as ego took root and power became more important than purpose, this knowledge was misused. What was once sacred became corrupted. Crystals, once programmed for healing, were turned toward control. Sound, once used to uplift, was twisted into manipulation. Some sources suggest that in the final era of Atlantis, the very tools that elevated their consciousness were the ones that ultimately destabilized it. They tried to force energy to obey will rather than align with wisdom. And that imbalance, that distortion of sacred technology, accelerated their collapse. This isn't a fantasy, it's a mirror. Today, we hold devices in our hands that pulse with frequencies we barely understand. Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, 5G, all invisible vibrations weaving through our bodies and homes daily. We are surrounded by frequencies, yet disconnected from the truth that once guided them. Atlantean tech didn't rely on code or screens. It was organic, living, in sync with the rhythms of the earth and the cosmos. And the reason this knowledge was buried is because it threatens the foundation of everything we've been told to believe. If you knew that your body was a frequency device, that your voice could heal, that your mind could direct energy, how would that change the way you live? The Atlanteans weren't gods. They were humans who remembered, and we are just beginning to remember again. This isn't about crystals on shelves or sound baths for relaxation. This is about unlocking what lies dormant inside you. The technology of Atlantis wasn't built, it was embodied. And the further we drift from our inner world, the more we forget that the real power doesn't come from the tools, but from the consciousness behind them. Atlantis didn't fall because of a natural disaster. That's just the version history uses to keep the story shallow. Yes, ancient texts speak of earthquakes, floods, and the island vanishing beneath the sea. But that was only the final act. The real collapse began long before the earth trembled, when the spirit of the people did. What caused the fall of Atlantis wasn't nature. It was the misuse of power, a spiritual decay. A civilization that had once lived in harmony with higher laws began to fracture from the inside. For thousands of years, Atlantis was said to be a beacon of divine alignment. The people lived in tune with cosmic order, their technology guided by wisdom, their leaders chosen not for ambition, but for purity of heart. They remembered that everything, government, science, spirituality, must serve the soul. But over time, cracks appeared. Curiosity turned into arrogance. Exploration into the self gave way to obsession with control. The Atlanteans, once humble co-creators with nature, began to believe they could dominate it. The spiritual elite, the priest kings, scientists, sages, split. Some still followed the path of light. Others turned their gaze inward, corrupted by the seduction of manipulation, ego, and separation. It wasn't a war in the traditional sense. It was an energetic split, a rift between higher consciousness and lower desire. And once that division took root, it spread like wildfire. The advanced technology, once used to heal and elevate, was turned towards surveillance, weaponization, and power hoarding. The energetic balance that had held Atlantis together began to collapse. The Earth responded not with vengeance, but with inevitability. When the spiritual foundation crumbles, the physical world follows. In Casey's channeled readings, he spoke of the sons of the law of one and the sons of Belial, two philosophical and spiritual factions within Atlantis. One upheld unity, divine alignment, and service to others. The other embraced materialism, self-interest, and manipulation of life force for personal gain. That tension built over centuries until it finally tipped the scales. The destruction wasn't a single act of wrath, but the end result of an energetic imbalance that could no longer sustain itself. And here's where it gets uncomfortable, because their story is ours. Look around. We are living in an age of immense power, yet we're more disconnected than ever from the soul of that power. We've made technological miracles, but we've forgotten the wisdom to guide them. We manipulate energy, time, biology, and yet our mental health is collapsing. Our connection to nature is fading, and our understanding of spirit is either mocked or commodified. Sound familiar? Atlantis isn't just a lost city beneath the ocean. It's a reflection of the choice we face now. We stand on the same edge, the same temptation to use consciousness to control rather than to serve, to build rather than align, to dominate rather than co-create. The same rift is growing between those who remember the law of unity and those chasing the illusion of control. And that's the real reason the story of Atlantis has been labeled a myth, because if we took it seriously, if we truly understood what it meant, it would force us to look in the mirror. It would show us that what happened before can happen again, and that we, right now, are deciding which version of history we repeat. The fall of Atlantis wasn't punishment, it was consequence. It was the result of a civilization forgetting the source of its own power, a society that rose to incredible heights because it remembered who it was, and fell because it chose to forget. The warning isn't ancient, it's timeless, and it's not about fear, it's about choice. History is written by those who benefit from forgetting. And when it comes to Atlantis, forgetting was never accidental, it was engineered. What if the story wasn't buried by time, but by design? What if the knowledge of Atlantis didn't just disappear under the sea, but was deliberately concealed to keep humanity asleep? Because Atlantis doesn't just threaten historical timelines, it threatens the entire foundation of how we see ourselves. After the fall, survivors of Atlantis are said to have scattered across the globe, not as refugees, but as seeders of knowledge. They carried with them fragments of what once was, the sacred sciences, the star knowledge, the spiritual practices that once governed a society aligned with divine law. These survivors didn't fade into history, they became its hidden architects. They founded the mystery schools of Egypt, encoded knowledge into temples, pyramids, and oral traditions. They didn't shout it from rooftops. They concealed it in symbols, stories, and structures that only the awakened would understand. Look at the architecture of ancient Egypt, the precision of the pyramids, the symbolism in the hieroglyphs. the alignment of monuments to celestial patterns. These weren't the products of primitive societies. They were echoes of a forgotten past, Atlantean fingerprints embedded into stone. The Sphinx, facing the rising sun at the spring equinox, is older than we're told. Scholars argue its water erosion doesn't match its assigned timeline. Why does that matter? Because if the timeline is wrong, then so is the entire historical narrative we've built upon it. The priests of Egypt knew. The initiates of the mystery schools were trained to remember not just intellectually, but spiritually. They worked with vibration, color, geometry, and breath. They didn't worship gods. They studied laws, universal laws, the kind that govern energy, thought, manifestation, and consciousness. The very laws the Atlanteans once lived by before they forgot. And then came the shift. Empires rose, religions formed, and with them came control. Power consolidated not through knowledge, but through dogma. Libraries were burned, teachings twisted. Those who remembered were hunted as heretics, witches, or madmen. The Roman Empire, the Church, colonial empires, they didn't just conquer land, they conquered memory. And so, what couldn't be erased was rebranded as myth. Atlantis became a fantasy, Lemuria, a fairy tale. The teachings of Hermes diluted into superstition. Esoteric traditions were either destroyed or pushed underground. The wisdom was never lost. It was hidden. Hidden in symbols, hidden in language, hidden in plain sight, and most of all, hidden in you. Because the biggest cover-up wasn't in textbooks or temples, it was in the human psyche. If you can convince people that they're ordinary, fragile, and disconnected from source, they'll never ask the real questions. They'll never seek what was buried inside them. They'll chase answers in external systems instead of inner knowing. That's the trap. And it's worked for centuries. But cracks are forming. People are waking up, remembering things they were never taught, feeling drawn to symbols, sounds, stories they can't explain. They're feeling the call, not to believe in Atlantis, but to remember it. And when enough people remember, the narrative can't hold. This isn't about rewriting history for curiosity's sake. It's about reclaiming your inheritance. Atlantis is not just an ancient story. It's a missing piece of your spiritual identity. One that was hidden not to protect you from the truth, but to protect the system from you discovering it. Not everyone will feel it, but those who do, those who feel like they've never quite belonged here, who've always sensed something deeper beneath the surface of life, are often carrying something ancient within them, something older than this lifetime, older than this world as we know it. The memory of Atlantis doesn't just live in books or ruins. It lives in people, and if you found your way here, it might be living in you. There's a certain kind of soul that walks through life with an unshakable sense that something is missing, something important. Not in the material sense, but in the spiritual one. You've tried to follow the script society gave you. Go to school, get the job, chase the dream. But the dream felt hollow. It felt disconnected, like a life designed for someone else. That ache, that restlessness, is not a flaw. It's a signal, a quiet pulse from a past self, reaching across time to remind you that you've been here before. Many esoteric traditions speak of reincarnated Atlanteans, souls who lived during the height and fall of Atlantis, now returning in this lifetime to help raise consciousness and prevent humanity from repeating the same cycle. These aren't fantasies for the spiritually curious. They're messages for the spiritually awake. You're not just drawn to ancient wisdom by chance. You're remembering it. You're drawn to crystals, energy work, ancient symbology, sacred geometry, not because it's trendy, but because your soul already knows how to work with it. You might have noticed your sensitivity. You feel the emotions of others more than most. You pick up energy in rooms, see through deception instinctively, and are exhausted by surface-level conversation. The world often labels that as being too much. But what if it's the opposite? What if you're not too much, but rather more awake than most? That heightened sensitivity is not a weakness. It's a sign of ancient memory. The Atlanteans were deeply in tune with frequency, emotion, and intuition. You're not broken. You're remembering. Perhaps you've always felt a pull toward ancient civilizations, sacred lands, or symbols that seem to glow in your mind even if you don't know why. These aren't coincidences. They're imprints. And the more you follow them, the more they begin to unlock what lies dormant. The dreams that feel more like memories. The skills you've never learned but somehow understand. The way certain truths resonate through your whole body, even if no one around you understands. You don't need external proof of who you are. The knowing is internal. It always has been. Reincarnated Atlanteans are not superior. They're not meant to lead cults or start religions. Their role is subtle but vital. They're the healers, the truth seekers, the system disruptors, the ones who feel too much and question everything. Their presence on Earth right now is no accident. As consciousness shifts, they're being activated, quietly, powerfully, and collectively. Their mission isn't to rebuild Atlantis in form, but in frequency. To embody the same harmony between spirit and matter that once defined that civilization, and to remind others that this level of consciousness is not lost. It's simply been forgotten. You don't need a label. You don't need permission. You don't even need to be sure. If any part of this speaks to you, if it lands somewhere deeper than words can reach, then you already know. You don't remember through the mind, you remember through resonance. And if your whole being is leaning forward right now, it's not curiosity, it's recognition. You are not here by accident. You didn't find this message, you answered it. The legacy of Atlantis isn't behind you, it's waking up inside you. There's a point in every seeker's journey when the question changes. It's no longer, was Atlantis real? But, what if I've been carrying it all along? At first it's subtle, a dream that lingers longer than it should, a conversation that feels strangely familiar, a pull toward the stars, toward ancient texts, toward frequencies and teachings that your rational mind can't explain, but your soul instantly understands. That's not imagination, that's remembrance. The Atlantean mind doesn't awaken through knowledge, it awakens through vibration. In Atlantis, the mind wasn't separated from the soul. Intellect and intuition worked together. Thought was a tool of consciousness, not a cage. To awaken the Atlantean mind today is to reclaim that unity, to remember that your consciousness is not bound by the limits of this world. The Atlanteans understood what modern science is only now beginning to rediscover, that the mind is not a product of the brain. It is a field, a frequency, a bridge between the seen and the unseen, and that bridge is still within you. Every time you meditate and feel your awareness expand beyond your body, you're stepping back into that frequency. Every time you align your breath with your intention, every time you use sound to shift your state, every time you choose stillness over noise, you're reconnecting with a way of being that has been suppressed, mocked, and forgotten, but never lost. It lives in your biology, in your energy field, in your knowing. You don't awaken the Atlantean mind by trying harder. You awaken it by tuning in. Stillness becomes a portal. Breath becomes a code. Movement becomes memory. The more you clear what was programmed into you, limitation, fear, separation, the more space you make for what was always there. And what returns is not information, it's resonance. You begin to remember how to listen without hearing, to see without looking, to feel without needing to explain. The Atlantean state of consciousness was expansive. It wasn't concerned with power over others, but with harmony within. Every individual was seen as a node in a much greater web of energy, connected to each other, the earth, the stars, and the source of all life. The human experience was not separate from the divine, it was a pathway to it. Awakening the Atlantean mind today means choosing to live from that knowing. It means remembering that your thoughts shape frequency, your emotions sculpt reality, and your beliefs act as tuning forks for the world you experience. And it's not always comfortable. As the old programs fall away, it can feel like losing your footing. Friends may drift, passions may shift. You may no longer be able to tolerate the noise you once lived in. That's part of it. You're not breaking down. You're breaking through. The Atlantean path is not a linear one. It spirals, it loops, it tests. But each return brings you deeper into truth. You are not here to escape the world. You are here to transmute it, to bring light where there is confusion, to embody the frequency of remembrance so fully that others begin to feel it too, without you needing to say a word. That's how the Atlantean mind spreads. Not through force, but through frequency. Not through preaching, but through presence. And it begins with a simple question whispered through time. What if I already know? If Atlantis was just a myth, no one would care whether you believed in it. No institutions would go out of their way to dismiss it. No scholars would scoff so aggressively, and no systems would be built to keep you distracted from it. But they do, and that should tell you something. The erasure of Atlantis isn't about fantasy, it's about fear. Not your fear, but theirs. Because remembering Atlantis doesn't just rewrite ancient history, it rewrites your identity. It reawakens something that makes you unpredictable, free, and free minds are hard to control. The modern world has been engineered to keep you from remembering. You're surrounded by distractions. You're flooded with information, but starved of wisdom. From the moment you wake up, your mind is pulled outward. Notifications, headlines, deadlines, never-ending noise. It's not random, it's a design. Keep people busy, and they won't ask deeper questions. Keep them entertained, and they won't seek truth. Keep them consuming, and they won't remember what they came here to create. The system isn't just physical, it's psychological. You've been taught to view reality through a narrow lens, shaped by media, education, and institutions that benefit from your amnesia. You've been told to trust only what can be measured, bought, and explained. Everything else, intuition, energy, ancient memory, gets labeled as delusion. You're not crazy for feeling there's more. You're conditioned to believe you're crazy if you say it out loud. The truth is, the knowledge of Atlantis never vanished. It was hidden beneath layers of ridicule. That's how they bury power. Not by destroying it, but by discrediting it. And the reason is simple. If enough people remember what Atlantis truly was, the current system can't survive. Because this system thrives on separation. Separation from the earth. Separation from each other. Separation from your own inner knowing. Atlantis was built on the opposite, on unity, coherence, and spiritual sovereignty. That's the threat. What happens when people remember that they don't need permission to access the truth? That their body is a temple, their intuition is intelligence, and their thoughts are creative forces? What happens when people realize that they are not consumers in a machine, but co-creators in a living universe? The system collapses, not through violence, through irrelevance. Because once you reclaim your power, you stop outsourcing it. This is why the most potent truths are often hiding in plain sight, dressed up as fiction or fantasy. It's easier to dismiss something than to defend against its awakening. That's why Atlantis became a bedtime story. Because if people saw it for what it really was, a mirror of who we once were and who we could be again, it would ignite something that can't be controlled. We live in an age of incredible information and profound ignorance. We know how to split atoms, but not how to sit in silence. We build machines that think faster than us, but forget how to feel. And yet, beneath all the noise, the memory still pulses. Quiet, but steady, in dreams, in synchronicities, in that unshakable feeling that you're here for something more than just surviving and repeating someone else's idea of success. The greatest act of rebellion today is to remember, not just the facts that were kept from you, but the feeling, the frequency, the way your entire being lights up when truth enters the room. That's not just curiosity, that's coded memory being activated. And the more you remember, the more they lose control, not because you're fighting them, but because you're no longer feeding them. Atlantis threatens the system because it reminds you of your true nature. It shows you that a civilization aligned with spirit and science, heart and mind, is not only possible, it's been done before. And once remembered, it can be done again. Not by governments, not by institutions, but by individuals. one mind at a time. Atlantis was never meant to be a memory, it was meant to be a blueprint, not for the buildings or the technology, but for consciousness, for the way we live, create, connect. It was a time when the inner and outer world reflected each other in harmony, a civilization built not on dominance but alignment. And while the structures may be gone, the pattern remains. The code never vanished. It just waited for the right frequency to activate again. And now, it's waking up through us. You may be wondering how a place lost to history could possibly return, but the return of Atlantis isn't physical. It's vibrational. It's not about land rising from the sea. It's about awareness rising in the soul. The Atlantean frequency is not a map to follow, but a state to embody. And right now, more than ever, that choice is being presented to you. Not in some grand event, but in quiet moments, daily decisions, internal shifts, the way you treat yourself and others. That's how the new Atlantis begins. Not in ruins unearthed, but in consciousness reborn. The old world teaches you to look outside for answers, to measure progress by how fast you move, how much you produce, how perfectly you perform. But the Atlantean path is different. It's slower, deeper. It asks you to turn inward, to feel, to question what you've inherited, to step away from noise and back into knowing. That's not easy, because everything around you, systems, screens, schedules, is designed to keep you distracted from that path. But distraction is not destiny. It's a test. And the moment you begin to choose differently, to listen to the quiet voice instead of the loud one, you're aligning with the frequency of Atlantis. And you won't be the only one. That's the beauty of remembrance. It spreads. One awakened person becomes a mirror for others. You don't need to teach or preach. Just by living in truth, you give others permission to do the same. The new Atlantis isn't being built with stone, it's being built with presence, with intention, with integrity. Communities are forming around consciousness, not convenience. People are gathering not around shared opinions, but shared energy. This is the Atlantean legacy in motion. The return is subtle. It doesn't shout. It hums. You feel it in the growing desire to live more authentically, to slow down, to connect deeply, to question everything that feels manufactured. That's the pull, the remembering, the shift from a world of control to a world of coherence. You are not small in this story. You are a living frequency transmitter. Every time you choose love over fear, curiosity over judgment, intuition over instruction, you tune into the Atlantean current. And the more of us who do, the stronger that current becomes, until it's no longer a whisper from the past, but a presence in the now. Atlantis was never just about where we came from. It's about where we're capable of going. And now, more than ever, the door is open, but no one is going to push you through it. This awakening isn't forced, it's invited, and you get to choose. The new Atlantis doesn't rise on its own. It rises when we remember who we are and choose to live like we've never forgotten. We've traveled through time, memory, and myth, but now we come to the only part of the story that truly matters: what you choose to do with it. Because this isn't just about Atlantis. It's about you, about your role in the reawakening of something the world tried to forget but couldn't kill. Atlantis doesn't live in ruins beneath the ocean. It lives in the quiet choices you make when no one's watching. It lives in the integrity you hold when the world tries to pull you out of yourself. It lives in the way you remember what this life is really about. You're not just here to survive. You're not here to check boxes or fit into a structure that was never built for you to thrive. You're here to build something else, something ancient yet entirely new, a way of being that honors the soul as much as the mind, a path that values inner alignment over outer validation, a life that doesn't just chase success, but redefines it altogether. Success in this new world doesn't look like accumulation. It looks like coherence, peace, purpose, presence. That's what the return of Atlantis really means. Not a city resurfacing from the ocean floor, but a frequency resurfacing in your daily life. You are the temple now. Your body, your mind, your spirit They're the tools, and the more you align them, the more you remember. Every breath taken in awareness, every word spoken with clarity, every act rooted in truth, those are the building blocks of the new Atlantis, one that doesn't need to be found because it's being created. But remember, this path isn't passive. It's not enough to know the story. Knowing is only the beginning. You must live it, speak it, embody it. The world doesn't need more information. It needs more living examples of what's possible when we wake up. That's your power. That's your invitation. You're not waiting for a shift. You are the shift. If you've made it this far, it means you're one of the few ready to go deeper. Sign up to our free newsletter, Insights Academy, through the link below and unlock ancient wisdom we can't publish here. Plus, receive a free copy of the Kybalion to support your journey. You were never meant to forget who you are. You were never meant to shrink, to doubt, to trade your light for comfort. You were born to remember, born to carry this ancient pulse into a modern world that desperately needs it. You are the bridge between what was and what could be. And every choice you make from this moment forward sends ripples through the collective. So, don't wait for permission. Don't wait for the world to catch up. The path of remembrance is walked by those brave enough to leave the known behind and follow the call of something deeper. Atlantis is not a destination. It's a remembering. And now that you've seen it, you can't unsee it. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."